Welcome to our series exploring the enigmatic realm of unexplained deaths and mysteries. Join us as we delve into perplexing cases that defy conventional understanding, where each clue raises more questions. Hey, you won't believe what I just learned about. Remember that weird space signal everyone talks about sometimes? The wow signal. Yeah, that one. So get this, back in '77, this guy Jerry Amon was doing his usual space listening gig at Ohio State. You know, searching for aliens and all that jazz. Suddenly, his radio telescope picks up this crazy strong signal. It was so wild, Jerry literally wrote wow on the printout. That's how it got its name. The crazy part, this signal was perfect, like suspiciously perfect for what scientists think aliens might use. It was on this specific frequency tied to hydrogen. Apparently that's the alien chat room of choice or something. For over a minute, this signal just blasted through, way stronger than the usual space noise. And guess where it seemed to come from? Some stars in Sagittarius. Yeah, the Archer dude in the sky. Here's the kicker, they've never heard it again. Not once. They've looked and looked, but nada. It's like the ultimate cosmic one-hit wonder. Some folks are still convinced it was ET phoning home, but others are like, no, probably just some space junk reflection or maybe a comet. There was even this guy a few years back who thought he solved it with some comet theory, but other scientists shut that down pretty quick. Isn't that wild? We might have heard from aliens that one time, and we're still scratching our heads about it almost 50 years later. Makes you wonder what else is out there.
Hey, have you ever heard of ball lightning? It's this wild atmospheric phenomenon that's been baffling scientists for ages. Picture this. A glowing, floating orb of light that can range from tiny to absolutely massive, just hanging out in the air for a few seconds, or even up to a minute. It's usually spotted during thunderstorms, but some folks have seen it on clear days too. The crazy thing about ball lightning is how unpredictable it is. It can zip around erratically, float in place, or even seem to pass through solid objects without a scratch. Sometimes it just fades away quietly, and other times it goes out with a bang. Scientists have been scratching their heads over this one for centuries, because it's so rare and hard to study. There are a bunch of theories about what causes it. Some think it's got something to do with silicon particles in the air, while others are looking at electromagnetic waves, or even tiny carbon structures. The thing is, we still don't have a solid explanation that everyone agrees on. Throughout history, people used to think ball lightning was some kind of supernatural occurrence. These days, we're trying to understand it scientifically, but it's tough to study something that shows up randomly and disappears in seconds. While it's generally not considered dangerous, there have been reports of it causing some property damage. It's one of those natural phenomena that really captures the imagination. Scientists are still working on cracking its secrets, and it's inspired all sorts of stories and debates. Pretty cool, right?
You know, déjà vu is one of those weird brain things that's really fascinating when you get into it. It's that freaky feeling where you swear you've lived through a moment before, even though you know logically that's impossible. The term itself is French for already seen, which is pretty spot on. What's wild is how common it is. Studies show something like 60 to 70% of people experience it at least once. It's usually super brief. Just a few seconds where everything feels eerily familiar and you get this sense of unreality, like you're in a dream or something. Scientists have been scratching their heads over this for years, trying to figure out what's going on in our brains. One theory is that it's a memory mismatch. Basically, your brain might be taking the current situation and incorrectly linking it to a past memory. It's like your brain's filing system has a hiccup. Then there's this other idea that it might be related to how our brain processes information. Some researchers think there might be a tiny delay in how different parts of our brain communicate. So maybe the information is getting to one part of your brain twice, making it seem like you're experiencing something for the second time. There's also a connection to the temporal lobe in our brains. Some scientists think déjà vu might be linked to tiny, almost unnoticeable seizures in this part of the brain. It's the area that deals with memory and recognition, so it makes sense that a little misfire there could cause this weird familiar feeling. Interestingly, déjà vu seems to happen more to younger adults and less as we get older. No one's totally sure why, but it could be related to how our brains change as we age. Some studies have also found links between déjà vu and stress or fatigue, so if you're exhausted or stressed out, you might be more likely to experience it. One of the trickiest things about studying déjà vu is that it's so spontaneous. You can't really make it happen in a lab, which makes it tough for scientists to study. They've tried some creative experiments, like using virtual reality to create déjà vu-like experiences, but it's not quite the same as the real thing. It's important to note that while some people think déjà vu is some kind of psychic experience or a glimpse into past lives, there's no scientific evidence for that. It's more likely just an interesting quirk of how our brains process information and memories. There's still a lot we don't understand about déjà vu, and neuroscientists and psychologists are continuing to study it. Who knows, maybe one day we'll fully understand this weird little brain hiccup. Until then, it remains one of those mysterious and kind of cool things our minds do. You know, déjà vu is one of those weird brain things that's really fascinating when you get into it. You know, déjà vu is one of those weird brain things that's really fascinating when you get into it. Crop circles are these fascinating patterns that show up in fields, usually where cereal crops like wheat, barley, or corn are grown. They've been seen all over the world, but the UK is where they really started getting attention, especially in the late 20th century. The whole thing actually dates back a long way. There's even a mention of something like a crop circle from the 17th century in England in a pamphlet called The Mowing Devil. But the crop circles we think of today started appearing in the 1970s, mostly in the English countryside around Wiltshire. It wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that crop circles really became a big deal. People started noticing these complex patterns that seemed to appear overnight, and it sparked all kinds of theories. Some folks were convinced that these circles were a sign of paranormal activity, or even messages from aliens. The designs were often so intricate and precise that it seemed hard to believe they were made by people. Then, in 1991, two guys from England, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, came forward and said they were responsible for a lot of these crop circles. They even showed how they used simple tools like ropes and planks to create them, but even after they admitted it, crop circles kept showing up, and some people argued that not all of them could be explained away as human-made. When you look at crop circles, there can be anything from simple circles to really complex geometric patterns that involve math, fractals, and even symbols. Most of the time, these formations appear overnight, which adds to the mystery. People wonder how they can be made so quickly and without anyone noticing. Although hoaxers usually use basic tools, some crop circles have characteristics that are hard to replicate, like perfectly bent stalks or crops that aren't disturbed around the edges. Scientists and skeptics tend to think that crop circles are mostly made by people, either as pranks or as a form of art. There have been some attempts to explain them with natural phenomena like wind patterns or electromagnetic forces, but these ideas haven't really caught on. On the other hand, there are still plenty of people who believe that crop circles have a supernatural or extraterrestrial origin. They point to the precision and complexity of some designs, arguing that they couldn't possibly be made by humans. Crop circles have really made their mark on popular culture. They've inspired books, documentaries, and movies. Remember the 2002 film Signs by M. Night Shyamalan? They're also a big topic in conspiracy theories and New Age beliefs. In some places, especially in the UK, crop circles have even become a tourist attraction. People come from all over to see them, and some artists have embraced the idea of creating these patterns as a form of land art. Even though most people now think crop circles are just the work of clever artists or pranksters, they still captivate our imagination. The mix of mystery, creativity, and the possibility of something unexplained keeps people intrigued, and that's why crop circles continue to be such a fascinating subject to this day. The Tunguska event is one of those crazy and mysterious things that happened in history. Imagine this, on June 30th, 1908, in a really remote part of Siberia, Russia, near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River, there was this massive explosion. It was so powerful that it flattened around 80 million trees over an area of about 830 square miles. The explosion was equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, which is about 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Can you believe that? Now, What's even crazier is that no one really knows for sure what caused it. The most accepted theory is that a meteoroid or maybe a comet entered Earth's atmosphere, but it didn't just crash down. Instead, it exploded in the air like 3 to 6 miles above the ground. This kind of explosion, called an airburst, would explain why there was no impact crater found, but the shockwave from the explosion was still strong enough to flatten trees for miles around. There are, of course, some other theories, but they're pretty out there. Some people have suggested that it could have been a volcanic gas explosion, or even something like antimatter or aliens. But honestly, those ideas don't have much scientific backing. The aftermath of the explosion was felt far beyond Siberia. Shockwaves were recorded all over the world, and in the days after, people as far away as Europe and Asia reported strange things like glowing skies and bright nights, likely due to dust and particles in the atmosphere from the explosion. Despite how huge this event was, it wasn't really investigated until almost 20 years later in 1927, when a Russian scientist named Leonid Kulik led an expedition to the site. They were shocked by the sheer destruction, but didn't find any meteorite fragments or a crater, which just added to the mystery. Since then, a lot of studies have been done, and while we have some answers, the Tunguska event still leaves a lot of questions. It's a stark reminder of how powerful and unpredictable cosmic events can be. This event has actually led to more efforts to track asteroids and comets that could come close to Earth to prevent something like this from happening again. It's wild to think about, right? The Tunguska event is like this mix of science and mystery that's captured people's imaginations for over a century. Even though we have a pretty good idea of what happened, it's still one of those events that makes you realize how small we are compared to the forces out there in the universe. Have you ever heard about the dancing plague of 1518? It's one of the strangest things that ever happened in history. And it all went down in Strasbourg, which is now in France but was part of the Holy Roman Empire back then. So, picture this, in July 1518, this woman named Frau Troffea just starts dancing in the street, completely out of the blue. She kept going for days, like literally non-stop. Pretty soon, more and more people started joining her, and before you knew it, there were hundreds of people dancing like they couldn't stop. These people weren't just having fun, they were dancing uncontrollably. They didn't eat, drink, or rest, and they kept going until they physically couldn't anymore. Some even collapsed and died from sheer exhaustion, heart attacks, or strokes. It was like something out of a horror movie. No one really knows what caused it, but there are a few theories. Some people think it was mass hysteria, a kind of collective freak-out triggered by all the stress people were under at the time. There were famines, diseases, and religious fears hanging over everyone, so it makes sense that people's minds might crack under the pressure. Another theory is that it was caused by ergot poisoning. That's when a fungus grows on rye bread, and it can cause hallucinations and spasms because it has chemicals similar to LSD. So maybe they weren't just dancing, they were tripping. Then there's the idea that this was tied to religious beliefs. Back then, people believed in saints having power over certain things, and Saint Vitus was the guy linked to dancing and epilepsy. They thought maybe these people were cursed by him, and dancing was a way to get rid of the curse. At first, the local authorities were completely clueless and actually encouraged more dancing, thinking it would help people get it out of their system. They even hired musicians to keep the dance going, but when things got worse, they finally realized that wasn't working and banned dancing altogether. They ended up sending the dancers to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, hoping some prayers would do the trick. Eventually, the whole thing died down after a few weeks, but it left people pretty shaken. Even now, it's still a mystery that fascinates historians and scientists. Can you imagine something like that happening today? It's just wild to think about. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is one of the most mysterious events in aviation history, and it still baffles people today. The flight, a Boeing 777, took off from Kuala Lumpur on March 8, 2014, heading for Beijing with 239 people on board. Everything seemed normal until about an hour after takeoff, when the plane suddenly went off radar and communication was lost. The last thing anyone heard from the cockpit was the co-pilot saying, "Good night, Malaysian 370," as they were supposed to switch over to air traffic control in Vietnam. After the plane's transponder was turned off, which is what helps it be seen on radar, the aircraft made a sharp turn west, flying back across Malaysia and out towards the Indian Ocean. Military radar picked this up, but after a while it disappeared completely, and no one knew where it went. This started one of the largest and most challenging search efforts ever. Initially, the search was in the South China Sea, but then satellite data pointed to the Indian Ocean. It seems like the plane kept flying for hours after contact was lost, likely heading south until it ran out of fuel and crashed somewhere in the vast ocean. Despite all the searching, including underwater exploration in the Indian Ocean, nothing was found in the primary search area. However, starting in 2015, pieces of debris, like a part of the wing called a flaperon, started washing up on shores around the western Indian Ocean. These were confirmed to be from MH370, but they didn't provide many clues about what really happened. There are a bunch of theories about what might have caused the plane to go off course and vanish. Some think it was a hijacking or that the pilot might have deliberately crashed the plane, but there's no solid evidence for these ideas. Others suggest that there was a mechanical failure or a fire on board, which might have caused the crew to try to turn back, but they became incapacitated before they could get help. The official investigations didn't come to a definite conclusion either. They said it was likely that the plane's change in course was deliberate, but they couldn't say who was responsible or why it happened. The search was officially called off in 2017 after nearly 3 years, but a private company did another search in 2018 without finding anything either. So, despite all the efforts, we still don't really know what happened to MH370. This whole incident led to some changes in aviation safety rules, like making it mandatory for planes to report their positions more often. But even with these changes, the mystery of what exactly happened to Flight 370 remains unsolved, and it continues to capture people's imagination. There are documentaries, books, and endless speculation, but without the wreckage or a clear answer, it's still one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the skies. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon are one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, yet they remain shrouded in mystery. Unlike other wonders such as the Great Pyramid of Giza or the Lighthouse of Alexandria, no definitive archaeological evidence has been found to confirm their existence. This has led to ongoing debate among historians and scholars about whether the gardens were real or merely a mythological creation. Despite the lack of physical evidence, the gardens are described in several ancient texts as an extraordinary feat of engineering and botany attributed to the ancient city of Babylon, which was located in present-day Iraq. The most detailed descriptions of the Hanging Gardens come from Greek historians like Strabo and Philo of Byzantium. They depicted the gardens as a series of tiered terraces overflowing with lush trees, shrubs, and vines, creating the illusion of a verdant mountain rising out of the desert. The gardens were said to have been built by King Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled Babylon around 605 to 562 BCE for his wife Ametes of Media, who longed for the green hills of her homeland. However, no Babylonian texts mention the gardens, and Nebuchadnezzar's extensive inscriptions, which detail many of his construction projects, make no reference to such a structure. The precise location of the gardens has never been identified, and some scholars suggest that they might not have been in Babylon at all. In the late 19th century, German archaeologist Robert Coldewey uncovered large walls and foundations at Babylon that he speculated might have supported the gardens, but these findings remain contentious. More recently, some researchers, such as Stephanie Daly, have proposed that the gardens were actually located in Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and built by the Assyrian king Sennacherib. According to this theory, later historians mistakenly attributed the gardens to Babylon. If the Hanging Gardens did exist, they would have been a marvel of ancient engineering. The descriptions imply the use of advanced irrigation techniques to sustain a wide variety of plants in an arid environment, possibly involving a complex system of pumps or a chain of buckets to draw water from the nearby Euphrates River. The gardens were supposedly constructed on massive stone terraces, an unusual choice of material in Mesopotamia, where brick was more commonly used. This would have required significant architectural innovation and resources. Despite the ongoing debate over their existence, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon have left a lasting impact on culture and imagination. They are often depicted as a symbol of the grandeur and mystery of the ancient world, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and speculation. Whether they were a real place or a creation of myth, the Hanging Gardens continue to capture the fascination of people around the world, standing as a testament to the enduring allure of ancient history. These lights have intrigued locals and scientists alike, with sightings dating back to the 1930s. The lights often appear as glowing orbs or flashes of white, yellow, or red, varying in size from small points to larger balls of light. They may hover in the air, move rapidly across the sky, or even disappear and reappear elsewhere. These lights can last anywhere from a few seconds to over an hour, and are sometimes seen at different altitudes, close to the ground or higher up. Since the 1980s, the Hessdalen lights have been the subject of scientific investigations. One of the most notable efforts to study the phenomenon began with Project Hestalen in 1983, where researchers set up measurement equipment in the valley. They recorded electromagnetic radiation and unusual radar echoes associated with the lights. In 1998, the Hestalen Automatic Measurement Station was established to continuously monitor and collect data on the lights, using video and other sensors to help analyze their characteristics. Several theories have been proposed to explain the Hestalen lights, though none are conclusive. One prominent theory is that the lights are caused by plasma, a form of ionized gas created by electromagnetic fields in the valley. Some scientists believe that local geological factors, such as underground minerals or metallic ores, could be generating these electric fields. Another theory suggests that seismic activity in the area might be causing the piezoelectric effect, in which quartz-rich rocks produce electrical charges, leading to the formation of the lights. Others speculate that the lights could be a unique atmospheric phenomenon, possibly related to ball lightning or air ionization. On the fringes, UFO enthusiasts have suggested that the lights may be linked to extraterrestrial activity, though no solid evidence supports this claim. Observations of the lights tend to peak during the winter months, particularly between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. While the frequency of sightings has decreased in recent decades, the lights continue to appear sporadically, keeping the mystery alive. The phenomenon has captured the imagination of the public and the scientific community alike, drawing tourists, researchers, and media attention to the region. Despite ongoing research, the true nature of the Hestalen lights remains unknown, and the mystery surrounding them only adds to their allure. Amelia Earhart's disappearance is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in aviation history. She vanished on July 2, 1937, while attempting to circumnavigate the globe in her Lockheed Model 10E Electra aircraft. Earhart was accompanied by her navigator, Fred Noonan, on one of the most challenging legs of the journey, flying from Lee, New Guinea, to Howland Island, a small and remote landmass in the Pacific Ocean. The flight was crucial for completing their mission, but it proved to be tragically fateful. During the final leg of the journey, radio contact with Earhart became increasingly sporadic. Her last confirmed transmission indicated she was low on fuel and struggling to locate Howland Island. Despite multiple attempts to communicate with the US Coast Guard cutter Itasca, which was stationed near Howland to assist with guidance, she never established a solid connection. Shortly afterward, all contact was lost. The exact location of her plane at the time remains unknown to this day. The US government quickly launched a massive search effort involving ships, planes, and volunteers, but no trace of Earhart, Noonan, or the plane was found. Over time, several theories emerged about what happened. The most widely accepted theory suggests that Earhart's plane simply ran out of fuel, and she crashed into the Pacific Ocean near Howland Island. Despite this being the dominant belief, no wreckage has ever been definitively found in that area. Other theories offer different possibilities. One suggests that Earhart and Noonan might have landed on Gardner Island, part of the Phoenix Islands, about 350 miles southeast of Howland. Artifacts discovered on the island over the years have led some to speculate that they may have survived there for a time before perishing. Another theory posits that Earhart's plane may have flown far off course and ended up in the Marshall Islands, where they were captured by the Japanese. Some even propose that Earhart was on a secret spy mission for the US government to gather intelligence on Japanese operations, although this theory is largely speculative. Over the decades, Amelia Earhart's disappearance has continued to captivate historians, researchers, and the public alike. Numerous expeditions have been launched, from deep-sea searches to further exploration of Gardner Island, in hopes of finding definitive evidence. Despite these efforts, no concrete conclusions have been reached, and her disappearance remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the unexplained. We hope these mysteries have sparked your curiosity and encouraged you to delve deeper into the unknown. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop seeking the truth.